There are three superannuation structures in Australia. You have the master trust, the self-managed super fund, and one that sits in the middle that's often overlooked. So we're going to talk about those three superannuation structures today. Now, the master trust is the traditional super fund, whether you have a retail fund or an industry fund. If you have never received advice, you will be put into a master trust super structure. It's a pooled unitized structure, which means everything to do with your investments, everything to do with your fees, everything to do with your superannuation are calculated in what are called units. So it's a bundled structure, which means you can't unbundle it and see what's actually happening underneath the bonnet of the super fund. And like I said, if you have not received advice, you would be sitting in that structure. Or if you've never started a self-managed super fund, again, you will be sitting in a master trust structure. Now, this has nothing to do with providers or anything like that. This is just the actual structure of your super fund. Now, what the master trust comes with is limited transparency. And like I said, again, it's because of the fact that everything you are entitled to, all your calculations are done within these units. When it comes to the investment options, you're pretty limited. You have probably about 4 to 5 generic investment options. One size fits all, like growth, balanced, high growth, conservative, things like that. So if you're trying to sort of get out of that one size fits all, you really can't, because the fund manager, that's all they provide you. And it works for most people. But if you're looking at what other options you have, if your account has grown and you really want to start making some big changes to your super, you need to understand the structures. And one really important note is how your income, how your tax offsets and all that is treated. And again, inside of the master trust structure, all of those are paid to your units. So you can't actually unbundle it and understand what is happening with really vital things like your income, your tax benefits, things like franking credits. Again, really important for you to know. So if you're someone that wants to understand exactly what's happening with those side of things, so you're getting everything that you're entitled to, the other two structures give you a lot more control to be able to unbundle everything and receive everything directly without a middleman being your provider. Now, the master trust comes with easy administrative offerings. It just sits in the background and it's pretty easy to run. So for most people that works. The self-managed super fund is quite complex. It's a do-it-yourself sort of fund. You have to do everything from start to finish. And then there is a lot of wind-ups with the self-managed super fund because of that factor. The burden is just too much. For some people, the shine wears off quite quickly and they decide that they want to move on and go back into a master trust. What they don't know is that there is a structure in the middle of these two, the master trust and the self-managed super fund, and that is called a wrap super fund. And a lot of people do refer to it as kind of best of both worlds, because you get the ease and the sort of background nature of a master trust, and you still get a big provider that runs everything. In a self-managed super fund, you don't have that. You have to do everything yourself. So you have a provider still at the top that does the administrative side of your super, and that's quite important. So I'll just go through some of the important sides of the wrap super fund on a piece of paper to make a bit more sense for you all. So with the wrap super fund, the way it works, you've got your provider at the top. And all they're doing here is they're just giving an administrative offering. And then you got your investment options menu as well. So they give you an investment options menu to make sure that you can exactly build a portfolio that makes sense for you, and your advisor has a lot of options to do that. So the way it would work, you'd have your fund managers all on the back of what sort of investor you are, whether you're a balanced growth, high growth, so that your advisor would build that for you of different fund managers. And what's quite important in a wrap super fund, you get a centralized cash account, very different to a traditional master trust, and everything you're entitled to flows in out of this account. So vital things like franking credits, your income from your investments, so dividends, all are paid into this account, and without a middleman. So very much transparent and unbundled, which is quite important for most people. You get access to unlisted fund managers. Like I said, 600 plus options, and some of them are unlisted fund managers that usually have $500,000 to $1 million of minimum investments. But because you get this sort of wraparound structure, hence the name Wrap Super, you can pool your funds with other individuals when it comes to super and get access to these specific fund managers with much lower account balances. So, usually the break-in is about, $5,000 to $10,000 to get access to those fund managers. So it does open up a whole world of investments, the wrap super. And it's often more suitable for most people, like I said, than a self-managed super fund, because the self-managed super fund is quite a big step for most people. You got to understand investments, the compliance, the audits. So there's a lot that goes on with a self-managed super fund. Again, the big thing is that it's a do-it-yourself fund. You no longer have this big provider at the top, big company that gives you online access and that basically runs your super for you without you having to worry about it. You do need an advisor with most providers to make sure the whole thing is doing well. It is a bit more complex than a master trust, but at the same time, you can sort of be pretty comfortable that your advisor is going to do most of the work. Versus a self-managed super fund, even if you've got an accountant, an advisor, so on and so on, doesn't matter. If the fund fails in audit, it's on you. It's on the trustees of the fund, which would be yourself and whoever else you've decided to go on a self-managed super fund with. So not a light decision to go with a self-managed super fund, but like I said, this structure sits in the middle, and it does give you access to a lot of the benefits most people are after, which is control, transparency, and just investment choice. So those three are usually the main reasons why people move into the self-managed super fund, and you pretty much get all that within a wrap super. So you can move away from the master trust that I was talking to you about before, which again is a bundled structure. You get 4 or 5 investment choice, and there's no way to actually unbundle everything to understand what is happening underneath the bonnet of your super. You just have to really take the word of your provider. And for most people, they're pretty significant sort of flaws for the actual structure itself. It doesn't matter who your provider is, whether you have an industry super, whether you have a retail fund. If you're sitting in a master trust, it's all the same. The way the super fund runs is the same, units and a bundled pooled structure. Now, what we need to also talk about is fees. So when it comes to a master trust, quite cost effective, percentage based, versus the self-managed super fund, you have to go a flat fee for no matter how many participants. You have a fixed fee for your accountant and so on, different providers that need to make sure this thing runs well. The wrap super fund is like the master trust. You still have a percentage cost, pretty competitive when it comes to differences of a master trust and a wrap super in terms of fees. Nothing that you kind of will look at twice and go, well, that's a pretty dramatic difference. Back in the day, the wrap super funds did cost a fair bit more because of the complex administrative offering they had. But nowadays with technology, it's quite competitive. So fees is, obviously a question that most people would have as well. If I jump from a master trust to a wrap super fund, what does that look like? Pretty competitive. In terms of providers, there's many providers in the wrap space. Again, the provider has zero influence on your returns. It's those fund managers underneath that would dictate your sort of returns. Master Trust has plenty of providers, also, 100 plus providers in Australia, but they also influence everything, so your insurances and so on. Another question most people would have is insurances. What happens with my insurances? You can keep your insurances, keep a little bit of money in your current setup if you can't get new covers. But if you're looking at an overhaul, make sure that you have the right covers and so on. You can hold external insurances where your wrap super fund still pays for those covers. So all that we would look into. It's quite important that your insurance needs are also met in the advice. So the insurance side would be important for most people, so that again you can fund super insurance directly from your wrap super. Yeah, and the good news is that you're going to have a provider that just does insurances, which is quite important, versus your master trust doing the admin, investments, insurance, everything. Now, I don't know about you, but most of the times when I've dealt with some organization that does everything, they do a pretty mediocre job on most of those areas. If you specialize in one area, the super is the super, insurance is the insurance provider, everything is separated, but everything is still paid through your super fund, which is great. So you're going to have all the bells and whistles, the features that you may want to make sure that you have that peace of mind, versus the default covers that come with a master trust. There's some gray areas that for most people are quite alarming. Again, that will be part of the advice as well with your advisor. So no one would roll you out of a master trust without making sure that the insurance conversation superannuation is had, and you're quite comfortable with the next steps there. So yeah, a lot of Australians jump straight from a master trust to a self-managed super fund, not realising there is that middle structure called a wrap super, and it will pretty much meet most of their demands and goals. So important to note, it's not as heavily advertised as your master trusts providers. On TV, you probably get a lot of ads on different super providers. Your accountant or property gurus would sort of take you towards a self-managed super fund because that's all they can give you advice on. A financial advisor will give you advice on master trust, wrap super, self-managed super fund. And most of the times, there isn't a compelling enough reason for you to move to a self-managed super fund, unless you have very specific investment goals that the wrap super fund does not meet. Maybe a self-managed super fund would be a viable option. But again, for most people, it's the fact that they don't know that there is a middle structure available that they sort of jump into a self-managed super fund. Now, all of these three structures, again, we can give you advice on. So if you need to have a chat, there is a link at the bottom, a 30-minute video strategy session, complimentary. We'll go through your current setup, high level, give you a bit of options and walk you through the sort of next steps. And the good news is that most Australians over the last few decades, they have used their super fund to fund the advice. So no out-of-pocket costs for most people that decide to move on with some financial advice to do with their super. So if you're not quite sure where you are sitting at the moment, you really need some help with your super, the link is at the bottom. Lock it in and we'll have a good chat with you.